Good evening, guys. How are you today? It's Saturday evening and we are having an RC workshop. So, most of you would feel very good about that, won't you? The best way to spend a Saturday evening, solve RCs. So everyone can hear me, so we can begin with the session. The agenda for today is a very specific agenda. What we'll be covering is we'll be covering only two types of questions, which are A, we'll be covering RC tones. Secondly, we'll be covering RC main idea questions. So these are the two types of questions that we would be solving today. We'll study the different approaches, we'll study the different types of tones, how do you go about establishing the tone in a passage, etc. These are all the things that we would be doing today. So I hope I am clear to all. Also, I just another quick rain check. I hope I'm audible to all. I can read Nidhi's comment that I am not audible. So, am I audible? A quick round of Y's. Great. We've got a simple presentation today. The presentation has a series of slides, which some of those slides would feature one line, two lines, four lines, etc. So that is what is going to be the content on those lines. And we'll try to guess the tone. What you guys would do is you guys would type in the tone in the text chat box. So that is going to be your task. So I hope I'm clear to all. We'll begin with the session now. Shifting to the first slide. Guys, read this quickly. This is like just a line. So quickly go through it. The tones that we learn from this particular example, almost all of you are correct. You've got this one right. The best possible tone for this passage, this paragraph, is factual. Guys, one important point here, one very important point. The tones on this slide, they do not represent the tone of the paragraph that we just studied. These are just neutral tones that I've clubbed together in a single slide. The last paragraph, the tone was factual in nature. So the answer is factual. Hypothetical is not the answer, Sudeep, in this case. And kindly keep this in mind after every slide, or we'll have 3 or 4 such slides which would have a group of tones, and then I'll individually explain each possible tone. Guys, carefully look at the title of this slide. The title says neutral tones. So that is the title in this particular case. It says neutral tones. What do we mean by the word neutral in this case, and how do we approach it? Let's divide the tone question or the attitude question in 3 categories. Every tone that you get can be divided into A, positive tones, B, negative tones, C, neutral tones. So these are the 3 different categorizations that we can use for tones. Neutral tones are ones which do not express the emotions of the author. A positive tone or a negative tone would be one where the emotions of the author are amply clear. For example, in a negative tone, the author adopts a viewpoint which is very cynical, very negative, and that kind of an approach. The degrees can vary, and thus we'll have different words to describe it. Similarly, in a positive sense, we can have any particular approach which should reflect positivity on his side. Now, the largest pool of words that we have for tones actually belong to the category which is neutral. And in that category, the first tone that should strike your mind is factual. What does the term factual imply? Factual implies something very, very, very basic, very simple, which is the passage is going to inform you with the help of facts. It is going to give you facts. I'll just go back to the last slide quickly. In this case, what is the passage doing? It is telling me car-borne suicide bombers blew up their explosives-packed vehicle near the Indian consulate in Afghanistan's Jalalabad city on Saturday, killing at least 8 children and wounding 21 civilians on the spot. What has he given me? He's given me a factual piece of data. So I can say this is a very, very data-bound paragraph. So that is why this becomes factual in nature. Now, if I go to the next tone, descriptive. Guys, if I give you two choices for this question and I say pick one between factual and descriptive, which is the better choice? For slide number 1, the Jalalabad passage. Factual or descriptive? Great, everyone got that. Why is it not descriptive? Anyone can type in the answer. Why is it not descriptive? These terms are synonymous, but it is not descriptive. Why so? Why between descriptive and factual we pick factual in the given case? Exactly. What he's doing is he's providing me data, but he's not describing the scene. So for example, if I had something like this in the paragraph, that Jalalabad is a beautiful city, it has 5 fountains, it gives you the kind of feeling that you are at home, and in such and such city, which has historically been so rich, blah, 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 a bomb blast took place. If he goes about describing the situation this way, then he becomes descriptive in nature. Here, he is keeping a very, very, very plain and vanilla fact-based approach. So that is why it is factual and not descriptive. Now we know two tones, factual and descriptive. How do you differentiate narrative from these two? Narrative. Any difference between factual, descriptive and narrative? Exactly. Ankur and Nidhi, you are absolutely correct. Shikha also has it bang on. Nitish, I am sorry, I won't be able to help you out with your sound problem. So probably what you'll have to do is disconnect and reconnect, or probably you need a faster net connection. For most of the students, the sound is clear, so I really won't be able to help you out right at this moment. Coming back to our discussion, factual, descriptive and narrative. The narrative tone, though similar to factual and descriptive, implies a greater sense of I. It is the most important thing in the narrative tone is the I. In this case, you need a strong narrator. If you got to build a parallel in your minds about this, the simple parallel that you can build in this case is with plays. Plays have narrators. Narrators express a very personal sentiment. They show a certain attachment. So that is missing here. The author has not been personal in any sense. So even though factual, descriptive and narrative are parallel to each other, they belong to the same category. These three tones have a subtle difference between them. So I hope I have clarified that. Guys, the next tone on the list, informative. Which word does it match? Informative. You've got three options: factual, descriptive and narrative. So the question is very, very, very simple. Informative is equal to what? Is it factual, descriptive or narrative? So this is where it becomes slightly dicey. Narrative is thrown out of the window. You've killed that answer option. So we've got only two options actually that we've got to pick from, which are factual and descriptive. Informative is, what is informative? Is it factual or is it descriptive? Informative for one is based on the word information. That means it would be telling us a lot of things. It would purely depend upon the situation. It's a synonym for both in this case. So this is where a little bit of logic comes into the picture. If a question has three answer options or four answer options, and two of those answer options are factual and informative, rest assured both of them cannot be the answer. So you've got to be really careful about these small little tricks that throw in the paper. See, now factual and informative imply the same thing. So if they imply the same thing, both of them cannot be the answer. So use these little tricks, use this little bit of awareness to improve your accuracy. So I hope I am clear with that much. That information has been passed on to you. Nidhi, if the question has both informative as well as descriptive, or in the case of factual and descriptive, you can still differentiate. So you can do that because factual is something else, descriptive is something else. So you can differentiate between the two. But when you have the answer option as factual and informative, now you can't pick which out of the two options is going to be the correct one. So your task would be similar to if you've got factual and informative both and you've got to pick one option, it's almost equivalent to finding hair on my head. So that's how difficult it is. You actually cannot do it. It's a pretty tough task that you will have to do. In that case, you can be rest assured that neither of them is the answer. Then it's very difficult. I have been waking up for the last 8 years and I've been trying to identify a strand of hair on my head, and I have failed on each possible day. So you can understand my plight. That is how difficult it is. Yeah, Ridhi, absolutely right. Jaskaran, I'm going to kill you for this. I just hate Robin Sharma. That guy is selling fake dreams. I absolutely hate it. So guys, we've deviated slightly from the topic, and my shiny surface has kind of taken us off traffic. And Sandeep, I have to comment, Dr. Batra is a fraud. I have tried and that treatment has failed. Let's get on to the next tone, theoretical. What does theoretical mean? Nidhi, you can then pick the synonyms for these words. Let's stick to the words that we have here in this case, and then I'll also come. How do you extend the words the word pool that we have here? So we'll just discuss the ones on the slides, and then we talk about others. Theoretical. What is theoretical? Theoretical would be, for example, I would just give you an example here of what theoretical would be. If there is a certain new discovery, or if in this case there are certain observations, and on the basis of those observations, for example, how a drug reacts in monkeys, I then give a whole theory that this is what is going to happen if the drug is taken by humans, and this might lead to this, and that might lead to that. Then you give what? You provide a theory. So that is the theory bit. Now the important question, what is the difference between theoretical now and hypothetical? Guys, what is the difference between theoretical and hypothetical? Quickly, anyone? Theoretical and hypothetical. Difference. Theoretical is experimental. Ankur, no. Experimental is something else. Difference. Okay, next, a simple yes and no question to you guys. Very, very simple yes and no question. If something is hypothetical, is it false? If something is hypothetical, is it false? First thing, if something is hypothetical, that does not mean it is false. If something is hypothetical, it simply means it is assumed. It may be true, it may not be true. I have a simple example here to illustrate this point to you. Science, the field of science actually operates on one principle, and that principle is the principle of hypothesis. What do scientists do before they have actually gone and conducted the experiment? They will give you a series of explanations and they will tell you that this is our hypothesis for the situation. This is how things may pan out. The important word here is they may pan out that way. So that is what an hypothesis is. Similarly, in the world of mathematics, we do not use the word hypothesis is replaced by the word conjectures. So mathematical hypotheses are also called conjectures. So that is that is why it's hypothetical slash conjectural. So that clarifies hypothetical slash conjectural for us. Now, how do we differentiate it from theoretical, guys? Because let's be honest here, there is a strong overlap between theoretical and hypothetical. There is an extremely strong overlap between the two. How would you differentiate between these two? Anyone with the answer? I want to know, how would you differentiate between the two? Guys, answers. Quick. Sandesh, if I keep your point in mind, that means if something is proved, it then becomes, it is not practical, it is theoretical. If something is proved, then it does not necessarily mean it is theoretical. Theoretical is something which has not been practically proven till now. Nidhi, here what we are doing is, and guys, this is a very, very, very important question here, which has been raised by Nidhi. Nidhi says the theories are always proved and then they are written. You've got to keep in mind here what we are trying to do, and the same thing is being said by Vanya as well. I would take this up because this becomes very vital here. We are trying to identify the tone of the author. What does tone mean? That's actually a very important question that we've got to answer. The tone is the sentiment of the author. Now, when you read a passage, he's never going to say that this is my theory. He will never say that. In fact, what you will be using here is you will be using theoretical as an adjective. You will be defining his qualities. That this is his quality of his article. This is how, this is why, this is the intent with which he has written the article. Here, while identifying tones, will not be identifying conjectures, hypotheses, and theories. No, we are not doing that. But what we are actually doing is we are trying to identify the sentiment of the author, and that is the critical word with tones, the most significant word. What are you trying to identify? You are trying to identify the sentiment of the author. How do you identify the sentiment of an author? The sentiment of an author, in this case, you try to identify, you ask yourself one important question. Why has he written this passage? What is the purpose? What is he trying to achieve? For example, in the first paragraph that we did, he was trying to pass on information to us, and that is why it became factual. Now, in a similar case, if there is, and I will give you two practical examples here, if there is a passage in which we are talking about the possible effects of the Narendra Modi government 5 years from now. Okay? So that is a possible outcomes, possible results 5 years down the line. How would India change? In that case, the author does not have the evidence to support what he's saying, but what would he give? He will provide that this is what is going to happen in all probability. Now, let's have another context. The second context here is a scientist observes, supposing there is the biggest bang theory. Fair enough? Okay. So from the Big Bang theory, we have the biggest possible bang theory. So that in that case, the author explains that according to me, these are the facts, this, and these can be explained on the basis of these assumptions, and this is how I can provide you the biggest bang theory. So this is my way, and in order to prove this, now I need to carry out A, B, C, D, E, etc. experiments. So this is where I'm starting off from. What would you call the second article in this case? The one with the scientist. Guys, answer. The one with the scientist is the hypothetical one, where he has used a set of facts, then he's added a set of assumptions, and he's provided a suggested explanation. Hypothetical and conjectural are somewhat scientific words. So if there is a scientific passage which has a scientific background, then in all probability, if the two options are hypothetical and theoretical, you would always pick the word hypothetical. Similarly, the first type of passage, the Narendra Modi passage, was a theoretical explanation where the author does not have any evidence. He is just going by his own gut feel. He's providing you his own opinions that this is what is going to happen according to me. Narendra Modi is such and such guy, and he will do this and this, and he will do that and that. So there is no practical evidence, but he is providing his theories. Now, at times, what you've got to be careful here is, and this is where you've got to be careful with tone questions. There is going to be an overlap. At times, theoretical passages and hypothetical passages, there is a similarity. So we will not be able to differentiate between them. So when you've got a scientific context, you use the word hypothesis, and when there is the author does not have precise evidence, I will just use your wordings. When the author does not have any precise evidence to base his recommendations on, and he's rather vague about things, then it becomes theoretical. Guys, please be very careful. I'm using very, very dicey wordings. I'm saying the author does not have precise evidence. Matlab, there is an element of feelings involved here. So you've got to be really careful. I will go once again. In case there is no clear-cut evidence and the author is essentially providing a theory which is not really backed up by any facts, there is no analysis that he's carrying out. He's just saying that this is going to happen and this is going to happen and that is going to happen. Then what? And this is how things would pan out. Then he's being theoretical. Remember, guys, kindly differentiate one thing. Here we are trying to identify tones from an RC question point of view. We are not studying tones, or we are not studying these words. I am not disputing the meaning of the word theory. What I am trying to do is illustrate how the tone theoretical is implied. So our emphasis is tones. When we talk about hypothetical Vanya, there will be an element of analysis involved. The author would have some facts, he will merge his assumptions, and then he would go on to provide his final suggested explanations. Indranil, the word empirical only comes into the picture when I base conclusions on the basis of evidence. Empirical is when I am giving you conclusions. Hypothesis is I am not giving you conclusions, I am giving you suggested explanations. So this might happen, or that might happen. So those two are very different. You are correct in a certain sense, but empirical and hypothetical are two different words. Hypothetical is I am not sure about my position. Empirical evidence, as soon as I start to use it, then I give you certain conclusions with surety. So that is the difference, and analysis is 100% used when I talk about empirical things. So that completes no, Manya, not always. If the author is giving you content where he is trying to explain something, or he's saying that this might happen and that might happen, that one would be hypothetical in nature. Yes, Nidhi, kindly go ahead quickly. Okay, I just understood your question now, Nidhi. When theoretical is proved, in case I have proof, see, then it does not remain theoretical. So I am actually providing you proof. So what would be the best tone? Guys, open question to all of you. In case I provide a theory and then I go on to prove it in the passage. I provide proof that this is it. This is the final result. I provide one definite answer. What is it in that case? Indranil? Sandesh, that answer is actually a good one. It is not informative, then the best answer would be critical or analytical. So that is a much better answer in that case. Great. Guys, next two words that we'll study today. Let's just pick up the pace a little. We are still stuck on slide number 1 and we have a lot of stuff to cover. Critical and analytical, two words. Any difference between these two? Critical and analytical. Guys, difference between these two words, critical and analytical. Jaldi. इतना time नहीं है. Critical is biased. No, Sandesh, it is not biased. Not necessarily biased. Guys, the difference between these two words is critical and analytical. Critical approach, for example, I'll give you two examples here to illustrate the difference, and we'll keep it a 2-minute discussion. Critical is, for example, there is a bill which is being tabled in the parliament. And the Hindu writes an article on that bill. And in that article, it goes on to explain each and every facet of that bill, provides you the pros and cons, that this is the good thing about it, this is the bad thing about it, etc., etc. It goes through the whole process, that cumulative process. So then in that case, it becomes critical in nature. It might provide you a conclusion at the end of the passage, or the conclusion might be left to you, that you can infer it between the lines, whatever he has suggested. So that is being critical. where he's looking at an issue in a very in-depth manner and generally setting up a pros versus cons debate. So it is generally going to be, this is good, this is bad, this is the benefit, this is not the benefit. Shikha, no, critical is not a negative word. Criticism is the negative word. Now, on the other hand, we have the word analytical. What does analytical mean? Analytical implies something very, very simple. Looking at something very, very deeply, minutely, giving it an analysis, deriving logic out of it. So analytical is actually synonymous with logical. So you would go in a series of steps and logically analyze something. So that is what analytical means. One step at a time, you analyze and you check. So that is what analytical is. An example of analytical, again, let's go back to our scientific context. What happens in chemistry? Guys, what happens in chemistry? In chemistry, what we do is we carry out tests, we carry out reactions, and there is a series of steps which are carried out. While I am carrying out those reactions, the chemical nature of those reactions, I would proceed in a very stepwise and logical manner. So I would keep on doing that. So one step at the time, I will explain that this happens, this reaction leads to that, this reaction led to this, and then I will reach my final conclusion that this is the final result. So the analysis would be very, very logical in this case. If you look at it this way, in a number of scientific passages, the analysis would be very, very logical. It would almost be stepwise in a way. So that is where I am maintaining an analytical approach. On the other hand, when I am going through a critical approach, what am I doing? I am setting up a pros versus cons debate, the good versus bad debate. I am trying to see something, whether this is good or bad, what kind of an effect it would have. So that is what critical would mean. If you've got to talk about them in a little more detail, then what you can do is, if you want to think about them a little more, effectively every critical passage would carry a certain amount of analysis in it. It would. So critical would always have a certain amount of analysis in it. But it is not necessary that every analytical article would be critical. For being critical, I have to carry out analysis for sure. But for being analytical, I do not have to be necessarily critical of something. I do not have to go the good versus bad route. So that is something that you've got to remember. Fair enough? Sadhvi, you've got to just remember one thing. The narrative tone is a personal tone. It has an I attached. It is going to be descriptive in nature, but the voice, it's going to be either in first person, or the narrator's view becomes very, very important in that. So that is why it is narrative. There is a personal description involved. Guys, so that brings us to an end of discussion for neutral tones. Gursimran, conclusions can come, they may not come. So there is no ground rule on that. There is no thumb rule for that. So that is a small little description. Yes, Ashutosh, I can summarize the slide. This was a very, very helpful slide which described neutral tones for you. And as part of your homework, you do one very, very simple thing. Guys, have you written down these words? Or I think you would have a copy of this slide. So what you've got to do is you have to find synonyms for each of these words. For each of these words, kindly find 3, 4, 5 synonyms, and effectively the 8 or 9 sentiments that we've studied here, they'll multiply into 30 or 40 tones. Fair enough? So that is what you've got to do. Some of the synonyms explore their meaning, so that would also tell you about the subtle difference between the words. So that is your small little homework. So I'm shifting to the next slide now. Guys, the tone of the first 3 sentences. The first three sentences, I'm trying to imagine you with a personality, not the brightest crayon in the box now, are we? Sometimes I need what only you can provide, your absence. The first three sentences, not the fourth one, that is different. Each of these sentences is different, treated independently. Guys, you are disappointing me massively here. Forget the previous slide. I want a new word. This has got nothing to do with the last slide. Imaginative, Sudeep, not quite. Close, but not quite. Negative, I can still agree. Hypothetical, no, not hypothetical at all. Agitated, yes, maybe we can say agitated. Cynical, no, Ashutosh, not cynical. What is cynical? Cynical is being extremely depressed and negative and pessimistic. Sahil, judgmental and satire. I keep those two. Pessimist, I take out of the picture. Sham, criticize. Derogatory, I keep those words as well. Guys, I have a clue for you here. The word is a 9-letter word. Oh, brilliant, Saloni. I was about to give the clue for the same word. The best word for describing these three words in these three sentences in this case is sarcastic. Sarcasm is the best possible answer here. What is sarcasm? When you say something like this, sometimes I need what only you can provide, your absence. That is sarcasm. That's actually quite a harsh taunt. So when you taunt someone, when you mock someone, that is when you use sarcasm. So in the first three sentences, the tone is sarcastic in nature. Guys, what is the difference between sarcasm and satire? Abhishek, no, it's absolutely not a euphemism. Just a second. It is a no, it's not a euphemism in this case, Abhishek. Satire is low grade, sarcasm is high grade. No, no, no. Sarcasm has irony, satire may or may not have. No, Sheena. Satire is positive, sarcasm can be personal. Things which are right, I'll repeat those. Sarcasm is generally personal in nature. Satire, generally, when we involve ourselves in satires, the intention is that person improves. Sarcasm, when you indulge in sarcasm, you indulge in mockery. You want to hurt the other person, you want to make fun of the other person. So that is being sarcastic. When you want the other person to improve, when you want the system to improve, when you want an overall change in society, then the tone becomes satirical in nature. In case you want to remember the word satire, the best possible example in this case is नुक्कड़ नाटक्स. नुक्कड़ नाटक क्या होते हैं? What are नुक्कड़ नाटक्स? Guys, नुक्कड़ नाटक. Brilliant. Street plays. What do street plays do? What do they do? They come with a teaching. Absolutely perfect. They come with a message. And what do they do is at times they make a ridiculous amount of fun of people or things or situations. They make at times brutal fun. They मतलब अगर इसको इज्जत का टोटल कचरा मतलब बर्बाद ही कर देना, ठीक है, मतलब बिल्कुल खत्म कर देना, वैसे वाली बेइज्जती भी करते हैं वो, ठीक है. बट what is the intention of doing that? The intention is greater good. So that is why it is satirical in nature. Great. So we've got sarcasm and satire. Absolutely clear. Guys, the last paragraph on this slide, tone. Anmol, you're a playwright, so how am I supposed to take that? I did not get the context. Abhishek, an example for an euphemism. So instead of saying you're fired, I can say to someone that you're fired, get out of my building, you are sacked. I don't do that. And I say to the person, you are relieved of your responsibilities. You have a lot more free time to go and enjoy life, live freely, have a blast. So that is a euphemism now. I have substituted the harsher term, you are fired, with a milder one in this case, which is you have a lot more free time to yourself. Exactly, Rhythm. What people do on funerals, you don't say the bugger is dead. You say such and such gentleman has passed away. At least this is what I've seen with funerals. These are the same people that you abuse day in and day out. You absolutely abuse them. You were like, oh, he's such a terrible person. As soon as they die, you go to their funeral and you say, such and such was such a noble soul, blah, blah, blah. So that is what people do on funerals. The most it's a microcosm of how society operates, actually, funerals. Guys, coming back to the last paragraph. Two animal rights protesters were protesting at the cruelty of sending pigs to a slaughterhouse in Bonn. Suddenly, the pigs, all 2,000 of them, escaped through a broken fence and stampeded, trampling the two protesters to death. Tone. Aman, you find this humorous? Man, you've got a twisted sense of humor. Guys, perfect answer. What is the definition of irony? Definition of irony. That is 100% correct. Harman, you get a thumbs up for that. Brilliant. Uh, when the intended outcome and the outcome that actually happens, those are at variance with each other, we say the situation is ironical. If any one of you wants greater clarity on the word irony, I will suggest one resource to you guys. If you've watched it or if you've seen it till now, brilliant. In case you've not, you've got to just run a quick search and see it. The resource is the oatmeal. Type in irony and oatmeal in Google and you will be displayed a wonderful graphic that will do a brilliant, absolutely mind-blowing job of explaining irony to it. Yes, Indranil, it's a comic strip and it is just mind-blowingly awesome. Amazing to read. The guy does an absolutely brilliant job. He is super famous internationally and once you see it, you would realize that it's actually a pretty good one. Guys, shifting to the next slide. Guys, who would answer? What is a paradox? Paradox. Paradox is something which is contradictory in nature or problems for which you cannot find a solution. I have the simplest possible example. If you've got to learn the word paradox, आंसर देना गाइस, तुमको आंसर देना इसका. मुर्गी पहले आई कि अंडा पहले आया? मुर्गी और अंडा. Only 7, 8 answers. Harman gets the perfect one. तंदूर चिकन टिक्का चाहिए. हम तो पंजाबी है, अपने को चिकन टिक्का, चिकन तंदूरी और बटर चिकन मिलना चाहिए. बाकी कुछ हो या ना हो, doesn't really matter. See, this question doesn't really have an answer. So similarly, paradoxes, they contradict, the situation contradicts, there is a contradiction, inherent contradiction in the situation, and you cannot really get to the answer. So that becomes a paradox. Nidhi, the comment is, means statements which can only be true if it is false. That slightly convoluted way of saying it. A simpler way of saying it would be, you've got a situation in which there is inherent contradiction. So when there is a contradiction, the situation becomes paradoxical. So that is paradoxical. Guys, quickly going through these words on the slide. Criticism. तुम बड़े ही बेकार स्टूडेंट हो, बिल्कुल घटिया हो, कोई होप नहीं है, एब्सोल्युटली टेरिबल, तुम टाइम पे नहीं आते, तुम होमवर्क नहीं करके आते हो, तुम्हारा कुछ हो नहीं सकता है, तुम्हारे कपड़े ठीक नहीं है, एंड सो ऑन. दैट इज क्रिटिसिज्म. Completely negative opinion. So that is criticism, and this was for none of you, because none of you is here and most all of you are on time. This is an online session. So that is criticism. We've already discussed satirical and sarcastic. A very good word thrown in by Nidhi here, which I think we should discuss. What is dogmatic, guys? Dogmatic. Quickly. Stubborn. Anything else? Principles, ascendancy, anything else, guys? Pragmatic, opposite. Pragmatic seems to be a really favored word today. Dogmatic is being biased in your views and being very, very narrow-minded and sticking to a particular set of principles, not open to change, and believing what you believe to be absolutely correct and nothing else to be valid. So that is dogmatic. It is based on the word dogma. I have actually put up a very, very entertaining post, words related to dogs, on Word Pandit. So if you've got time, go and read that as well. So words related to dogs. So if you want to explore, you can explore that as well. So that is being dogmatic in nature. Guys, next word on the list, concerned. What does concerned mean? When I talk about tones, what does the word concerned mean? Empathy, full of care, worried. Concerned in the case of RCs, when we have passages, it would imply a sentiment where the author is in a way afraid of certain outcomes. He's very worried that what is actually going to happen. When he shows, for example, I have the perfect context for you. If there is a passage on global warming and the author goes on to paint a very negative picture that this is what is going to happen, and if the temperature keeps on rising, this might lead to this, the polar ice caps might melt, the world would be flooded, the seas would rise, etc., etc., and we've got to do something immediately about it. And then he goes on to explain what needs to be done urgently. Then what is he expressing? He is expressing his concern. He's expressing his worries. Concerned and worried, two very similar words. Again, very, very difficult to differentiate between the two. But if you've got to differentiate, worried is the slightly stronger word. Concerned relatively is less on that scale, but similar word. Acerbic, harsh, bitter. These are all represented, joined by the common word which is in the middle, which is harsh, which means these are very, very, these are words which would represent a very, very, exactly, these would be related to criticism, and effectively this would also imply that the person is being unfair, he is absolutely being an idiot, he is being rude, he is being absolutely the worst possible creature on this planet. So that is what these words would imply. A good question there, Indranil. Thoughtful. What would be thoughtful? Guys, difference between thoughtful and Concerned. Thoughtful and concerned. Exactly. Perfect there, Indranil. Thoughtful can be positive. Concerned would always be in a context where you are afraid that something bad is going to happen. So, Sudeep, thoughtful is a subset of concerned. I would actually flip it and say concerned is a subset of thoughtful. So, you should actually flip the relationship there. So, that would work better. Guys, we had another question, Megha's question. What is the difference between acerbic and criticism? Acerbic and criticism. Acerbic is the harsher word. In terms of degrees, it's a lot more harsher, it's a lot more personal. It implies a certain amount of rudeness, which is not necessarily implied by criticism. Say, for example, we've got the recent Deepika Padukone controversy, which has been flying around the tables in the last couple of days. Now, in this case, the Times of India has come in for a lot of criticism. Now, if I start abusing Times of India and if I start abusing the particular journalist who absolutely posted a reprehensible story about Deepika Padukone, in that case I become acerbic in nature. But in the first case, I am just criticizing the newspaper, which they are actually being right now. They are being severely criticized. The last two tones on this slide, melancholic and sad. Guys, these are two terms which would represent the author is very, very sad about something. He's very gloomy about something. Homework for you. Generally, if you think about RC passages, some of these tones are actually not applicable. यार अब वहाँ पे melancholic कौन जाके ढूंढेगा और कोई लिखेगा कैसे melancholic passage? Very, very hard to write something like that. So that is why this is generally not a tone which is very common in RCs, not in the kinds that are there in CAT. Yes, Jaskaran, you will be very, very, very melancholic when your girlfriend leaves you. So that is actually the perfect context to explain melancholy. Abhishek, it's a little hazardous to say that it is more negative than sad. Melancholy actually represents a deeper pain somewhere in your heart. So that is what melancholy represents. It's a deep sadness, a silent sadness which is there always with you. So which overtakes your personality, takes over your personality. So that is what melancholy is. And that's more a difference in literature more than anything else. Solution, Indranil. Saturday night, thinking about drinks already. I am sure you must have on the menu the drink that you are going to have today. But no, drinks are not a good solution for melancholy. If one girlfriend leaves you, find another. That is a better solution. Guys, we'll switch over to the next slide. Nidhi, we'll just hold on for this for a moment because we are at 7:25 already and we've got only allowed 35 minutes and we've still got a lot to cover. So I'll just hold off on doubts for a few minutes now. Guys, quickly, you've got to read these two paragraphs in conjunction and provide the tones. In conjunction, that means in continuity, snap like this. Read them together and tell me the difference between the two. Quick, guys, very, very quick. Guys, I want the tones when in comparison, in conjunction, the two paragraphs, you've got to explain them in conjunction with each other. There is a relationship between the two here. The first one says 41% of Americans pay no federal income tax. These people believe they are victims and would never vote for a Republican candidate. The author here is being very, very biased. He is being dogmatic. He is reflecting his own opinions. So this is what you call being subjective, where the author gives out his own opinions to explain a set of facts. That is being subjective. Now we switch to para number 2, which says Apple only allows apps that the company has approved to be installed on iOS devices. The company does not permit all apps to run on its platform and follows a given convention to check every app that is submitted to it. Here in this case, the author is being very, very factual. He's just narrating a particular rule that Apple adopts. So here the author is being objective. The purpose of giving you these two paragraphs right next to each other was to explain the difference between the terms objective and subjective. The first one is subjective. It can also be called dogmatic to a certain extent. It can also be called opinionated, where the opinions of the authors are being reflected. Para number 2 is purely informative, factual, or we have another word for this, which is called objective. So I hope I am clear with this little difference between objective and subjective tones. Fair enough, guys? I hope this does not require any more discussion. Shifting to the next slide. We've already covered the last bit in this case, subjective, opinionated, objective. These are the mixed bag kind of slides. Then you've got something like authoritative and commanding. What does authoritative and commanding mean? It simply means in this case that the author gives out his conclusions in a manner where he's very certain that this is going to happen. So he's in a commanding position. Generally respected individuals in their fields, for examples, Peter Drucker in the field of management would be an authoritative voice when it comes to theories related to management. Exactly. Ironical, we've already covered. Nostalgic, when you feel pain for the events of the past, when there is a yearning to go back to the past, there is a longing to go back to the past, then we say the feeling is nostalgic in nature. Guys, what we've given out is a series of words which you've got to explore, go back, and what you've got to do is you've got to make a much more comprehensive list of these words. Rhetoric. What is rhetoric, guys? Shika, critical does not necessarily mean that the author is biased towards something. Opinionated means when the author is very, very, very biased towards something. Rhetorical is when you only raise a particular question because you want to raise it, when you want to only give your opinions, you do not want to listen to others. It's a usage of words without necessarily making a point, just for impact rather than making any actual point. Apurv, subjective is when you represent opinions of your own. Sarcasm is when you pass on taunts. I did not get the second word which says sarcastic. I have not heard of any such word. No, Sandesh, not as trivial. Trivial is meaningless. So trivial is actually meaningless. Sarcastic and sarcasm are the same. That's just a form. Sarcastic is the adjective, sarcasm is the noun form. Guys, tone for this one. Sad or melancholic. Great. I'll quickly go through the slides now. We are running really terribly short on time. So I've got to be a little more quicker now. Guys, tone for this paragraph. This is actually a pretty clever thing done by the author, Chief Vigilante Officer (CVO). What is it? The author, is he being critical here, or is he using criticism? Guys, critical or criticism? It's criticism. The author is not being critical here. There is no balance. He is criticizing a particular person. He is being harsh towards that person. He is being acerbic towards him. He is being very, very strong with respect to a person here. So in this case, he is being critical. Sorry, criticism. Yes, Shikha, you can call this opinionated as well. These would be 2 slides now. Gursimran, yes, it is sarcastic, but it's a lot more than sarcastic, the last one. Because the sentiment of criticism was a lot stronger. These were not simple taunts. So sarcasm, yes, but it was coupled with more criticism as well. Guys, these are 2 slides. These would be in continuity. Read this one quickly, then I'll shift to the next one. So what is the tone here? Sarcastic or satirical, guys? 2 options. Satirical or sarcastic, or both? If you had to put 500 rupees on an option, which option would it be? 500 rupees. Satirical or sarcastic? Sarcastic 1000. We've got, the biddings are open, guys. Let's bid 500 or 1000. The rate is going up. In this case, the author is being, oh, we've got a big bid there from Jaskaran. Here, the author, when he says the arm rust party pack is made of pulped kejri, jhal mamta is a snack which only sustains the masses of Calcutta. Ditto with amma idli or rice plate which is always ready. Satirical or sarcastic, guys? I will just alter the context here. If in case of these Indian political parties, these are parties that we all know, and these are people that we know. So in case of these political parties, we were talking about American political parties, and you were reading this neutrally. You did not know these people previously. So there is no previous information that you are using here. Then what would this be? Don't let your own information cloud your judgment. The author in this case is actually being sarcastic. Now, as soon as I bring in my information that this is about the political parties in India and the person wants improvement, then I would want the tone to be satirical. But here in this case, the author is actually not hinting at any improvement in the system. He is just simply focused on one thing. In this case, the author is in fact a she, Bachchi Kadkadiya. There is nothing to be improved here. The author in this case, she is just making fun of the situation, and she is taunting the current system. There is no systematic improvement that can be brought about by this particular author. So Jaskaran lost a lot of money. Sadhvi, I am sorry, I have absolutely nothing in my power to solve your sound problem. But this was a close call. Generally, if this comes in the examination, you will not have both options. Both the options would not be there. So you would only have either sarcastic or satirical. So otherwise, it will become very, very, very difficult for you to judge the answer. So that would become very difficult. It would be a huge issue. Shifting to the next slide, guys. We come to our next agenda of the class, RC main idea. Sadhvi, the answer is satirical. But the thing is, it's a very close call. So it's not necessary that both the answers are very close to each other. So in the actual exam, if such a passage comes either out of sarcastic or sarcasm, you'll only have one option, not both the options. RC main idea, there are a few pointers that you guys should keep in mind for this. The main thing for RC main ideas is that you've got to treat the passage as a unified whole. You've got to treat it as one. And the individual sentences or paragraphs, they develop that one central idea. So you've got to always keep at the back of your mind, a single point is not important. What is important is the overall theme of the passage. And for this, what should you keep in mind? Always try to do one little thing. For the different paragraphs in the passage, try to develop their main ideas. The different paragraphs, para 1, 2, 3, 4, all 5, 6, 7, 8, all of them would add up to provide you the central idea of the passage. It is extremely critical that you look at the individual elements. Do not focus on one single aspect of the passage. Remember what the main idea says. It says that please consider the overall passage. Which are the different kinds of incorrect options that you have in this passage generally? Guys, is the audio there? Now, can you hear me? Vanya, can you hear me? Okay, great. Which are the different, I'll just have a quick recap now, whatever I said. The main idea of the passage should be developed based on the whole passage. It should not be developed based on a single point. It should keep everything in consideration. And what you've got to develop is one para at a time. You've got to keep making mental notes. That para 1 this was the main thing, para 2 this was the main thing, para 3 this was the main thing. That always helps you out in a main idea question. There are different kinds of incorrect answer options that we generally see in these question types. Type 1 of incorrect answer option, the option is out of scope. That means it is not related to the subject of the passage. Guys, always do two things with RC passages. Identify two things. One, the subject of the passage. What is the one main thing the author is talking about? Globalization, liberalization, pacifism. Is he talking about a particular theory in psychology? Is he talking about the elections in Scotland? Is he talking about the Aam Aadmi Party, Narendra Modi? Who is the subject of the passage? That is part 1. The second thing that you've got to identify for the passage is what does he say about the subject of the passage. Now for a main idea question, the answer option is equal to subject plus the central point. The subject has to be retained. So any option which does not retain the subject of the passage is what we call out of scope. A. The second kind of incorrect answer option that we have in this type of question, where what I do is I pick a point from the passage, introduce a slight modification in it and give it to you as the answer. What happens as soon as we read it, हमारा दिमाग चलता है यार, ये तो option पढ़ा था मैंने, I read this. So as soon as you get the feeling I read this, you are very likely to select it. Now that is something that you should avoid. You should not get stuck in, don't get sucked into that trap. You read it, does not mean it is correct. You have to confirm what it says actually means. Yes, Nidhi, it is correct. It is totally a personal choice. Whatever you find comfortable. Third thing that you got to keep in mind, the third kinds of incorrect answer options, tertiary points. Missing tertiary points these are points which are there in the passage. These are points which are correct, but these might not necessarily be the main idea of the passage. Remember, main idea is what? The most important point of the passage. So always remember that. The next thing that you've got to keep in mind, opinions or emotions. Remember, what do I mean when I say provide me the main idea of the passage? I am not asking you whether the main idea is a good one or a bad one, whether the passage is doing a good job or a bad job. What am I asking? I am asking you factually, what is the passage talking about? So do not provide opinions in this answer. Simply provide what is the passage talking about. So these are some central concerns that you've got to keep in mind while you answer the main idea question. So I hope these aspects are clear. Make a quick note of these and generally remember them while answering questions. I'm shifting to the next slide, so there is a pause of about 15-20 seconds. Guys, we have one passage now, so what I want you guys to do is, the passage would be in 3 or 4 slides, so make sure you read it quickly. So slide number 1 minute to read slide number 1. Quickly read it. Should I shift to the next slide? Nidhi, no answers. This is a long passage, so we will have 2 questions at the end of it. We'll solve objective questions for this passage. Guys, I'll not ask next time. After 60 seconds, I will shift the slide myself so that I don't break your concentration. Super quick, guys. Awesome job. This is the last slide. Guys, answer to this question. The primary purpose of the author of the passage is, here the primary purpose is written in a language which is equivalent to the main idea. Answer. Option number one, we rule out option number one, but because the passage is not about how money works, the passage is about how humans operate. By the end of the passage, he says, we are not machines. So the topic is we. Now between 3 and 5, the two options which are confusing. To illustrate through examples how human desires cannot be quantified in objective terms and will always remain a function of individual vagaries, this perfectly fits, because this is what he's saying. The example of money, etc., etc., is all about this, that you cannot quantify our desires. Fifth, to illustrate that how human beings are susceptible to imbalances and fluctuations throughout life and prone to events which define personality, goals, dreams, and desires. Now, fifth is a very, very clever answer option. It uses a lot of the words given in the passage, but if you look through it carefully, it creates a slight problem. What does the passage say? The passage says that human desire cannot be quantified and we are not machines. It is not possible for us to arrive at any objective criteria. Option number 5 actually brings in a different perspective. It says human beings are susceptible to imbalances and fluctuations. In what sense? That important thing is, it does not define what kind of an imbalance or fluctuation I am talking about. That element of desires is missing from option number 5, and that is why the correct answer in this case is option number 3. Option 3 is the correct answer here. Guys, the next question is the tone question for the same passage. Answer for this: Shikha, take some more seconds. Guys, think a little more closely. Just be careful. A is the first thing. Is he being factual and descriptive? Guys, factual and descriptive? No, we can throw that out of the window. It's a terrible answer option. Second, is he aggressive and critical? No. I cannot say that he's being aggressive. That's not a sentiment that we can find. So we rule that out as well. Next, is he equivocal and objective? He is not equivocal. Guys, definition for the word equivocal. Equivocal, definition. Mega, no, not biased. Equivocal is being ambiguous, when you are not clear. Yes, absolutely correct, Sanari. It is me, Netalog, they are always equivocal. They do not give a clear answer. So here he is not being equivocal. He clearly says that this is what human beings are not machines. They are not this, they are not this, they are not that. So he is being unequivocal. He is very, very clear. Now that brings us to the most important question, 4 or 5. Is he unequivocal in the passage? Guys, we'll study one word at a time. Is he unequivocal? I think the answer has to be a yes. He is very clear with his views. So that means option number 4, word 1 is correct. Is he subjective? Is he subjective? Does he pass his own opinions? He does not give out his own opinions. Okay. Is he judgmental? Judgmental here is a synonym for subjective. When you are judgmental, you give out your own opinions. So he is judgmental. Is he analytical? Is he analyzing something? Yes, he is definitely analytical because he maintains an approach where he is very, very careful, and he says that he outlines the logical process. Why is he giving out his own opinions? So, the only problem between 4 and 5 is the word subjective. There is not, there is a little bit of clarity missing on that subjective bit. In terms of answer options, 5 is the better answer option here. So option number 5 is the better answer. If option number 5 was not there, option 4 would have become the answer. So the best answer in this case is option number 5. Tricky question can trick you in the examination. So the best answer here is option 5, and that is the answer. Sudeep, you will generally find you would generally be you'll observe passages where there would be a change of tone, but when we talk about the question, we generally identify the ones which are the most consistent ones. Authors would have different tones in different parts of the paragraph, but you've got to always keep the overall sentiment. Harman, you are absolutely correct there. Judgmental is being, actually it's a harsher word. Subjective does not necessarily mean being harsh. Abhishek, this is a particularly tricky question, but yes, you should generally attempt tone or main idea questions. These are questions which you should solve for sure. Why do I say you should solve main idea and tone questions? For the simple reason they do not probe you on specific facts. That means you might not understand parts of the passage, but if you understand the overall gist of the passage, you will be able to answer these questions. So that is why I am generally a fan of these questions, and I believe you should solve them. Harman, here we are picking the better answer, not the correct answer. So as soon as we pick the better answer, it becomes a tougher choice. Judgmental is also used in another sense, Harman, wherein you pass strong opinions on something. So judgmental is not necessarily always negative. It also is a synonym for subjective. So can be used in that context as well. So you've got to keep that in mind. You've got to keep the multiple implications of words in mind. You cannot have a rigid mindset that a word would only carry a single meaning. Guys, that brings us to an end for today. We've reached the 8 p.m. deadline. That brings us to an end for today's session. Was a wonderful session today, a lot of interaction. Generally, RCs are the tricky thing. You expect people to get bored and run away. Some of you might have run away, in fact, actually, but majority of you stuck it out here. Great to see you here. Shikha, you can go to wordpundit.com, cat.wordpundit.com. It has a section 50 books that you should read for cat. So that is what you should do. Nidhi, personal choice out of 5 questions in RC, you can solve. You can solve 2 to 3 questions out of 5 if it's a 5-question RC. Sadhvi, I'm not sure about that. I do not make the schedule, so I'm not 100% sure whether there will be more sessions or not. Guys, thank you very much. Have an absolute blast. It's a Saturday evening. Have fun, party hard. Indranil, we already know what Indraneel would be doing. So rest of you go enjoy. Don't study hard. Yeah, it's a Saturday night. Saturday nights are meant for partying. You've got to party one day at least. Otherwise, you'll not study that well. So you got to have a work-life balance here. So that is what you got to do. Yes, Kings 11 are going to win today for sure. So thank you guys. I'm logging out for now. Thank you very much. Bye bye.